Good evening, and welcome to Artist Talk on Art on Monday, February 12th, 2024. Thank you for joining us. I'm Miriam Deutsch, Artist Talk on Art Programming Director. Tonight's program features Babs Reingold in dialogue with curator, writer Mark Orman about her current exhibit, Under My Skin. Founded in 1974, ATOA is the art world's longest running and preeminent forum. We are now in our 50th year, and we will be celebrating with a gala at the Soho Photo Gallery in Tribeca on Monday, May 20th, 2024. And soon we'll begin soliciting works for our anniversary fundraising auction. So look for that. The ATOA archive resides at Archives of American Art of the Smithsonian, where it has surpassed 9,000 artists and 1,000 panels and dialogues. You can also view tonight's program as well as other recent Zoom recordings on the Artists Talk on Art YouTube channel. Comments made by our presenters this evening do not necessarily reflect those of ATOA. Also, please join us on Monday, February 19th for Belgium artist Veronique Sabin, who will discuss her creative practice with Eric Lenz. Tonight, we're so proud to present Venezuela-born American artist Babs Reingold's current exhibit, Under My Skin, which is on view at Spaces Contemporary Art Gallery in Sarasota, Florida. Babs creates sculptures, drawings, and installations focusing on beauty, the environment, and poverty. She has an extensive showing history, including 17 solo exhibitions and over 75 group exhibitions, ranging from museums, universities, alternative spaces, and galleries. Solo exhibits and galleries include New York City, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Savannah, St. Petersburg, Florida, Jersey City, and Buffalo, New York. Museum exhibits include the Newark Museum, Jersey City Museum, Albright-Knox in Buffalo, New York, Burchfield, Penney, Buffalo, New York, the Tampa Museum, and Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, Florida. She has work in museum and private collections throughout the United States, including the Newark Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, the Birchfield Penney Art Museum in Buffalo, and the Savannah College of Art and Design. Her awards include a Florida State Fellowship, 2 fellowships from Pinellas County, and a New York Foundation of the Arts fiscal sponsorship, as well as Atlantic Center for the Arts Residency and a nominee for the Joan Mitchell Fellowship. Babs lives and works in St. Petersburg, Florida, with a viewing space in New York City. Babs will be joined by Mark Orman, who is a writer, guest, curator, and art advisor. In 2019, after more than a decade, Mark stepped down from his position as director and curator of exhibitions for the campus galleries at Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida. He also served as associate director of Green Contemporary in Sarasota from 2006 to 2008. And from 1978 until 1999, Mark worked with numerous art museums, and in Miami, he was director of the Center for the Fine Arts, now the Perez Art Museum in Miami, from 1990 to 1994. Mark has written over 500 articles about art and architecture. He is the author of over 35 catalogs, publications, and books on art and artists. He has organized, curated, and coordinated the installation and presentation of over 200 exhibitions for museums and galleries. He has also served on grant panels for the National Endowment for the Arts, Andrew Mellon Foundation, and the Guggenheim Foundation. Mark has a bachelor's degree in art history from the University of Pennsylvania, and his master's degree is in art history and museum studies from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He was awarded a certificate in museum management from the Getty Institute at the University of California, Berkeley. So now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Babs and Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Mark, do you want to start, or should I go ahead and?
Why don't you just begin? Yeah.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to Miriam and Doug and ATOA for having me on and to talk about this solo show that I'm having. And to thank Mark also for joining me. I roped him into this thing, but he was happy to do it. We've known each other for a long time, and he's familiar with my work. So I thought he would be a good choice to have a discussion about it. I would like to start first by sharing my screen with a video that is the show. It's a little bit on the dark side. I apologize for that, but it gives you an idea of what's happening in the gallery. So I'm going to give you this brief tour of what's happening in the gallery, and then I'll switch to a PowerPoint presentation. And so I'm going to, can everyone see the video on screen? And should I go ahead and start playing the video? I think I'm going to do that. It looks like I'm going okay. So the show is titled Under My Skin, and the title comes from this idea that I really wanted to talk about all the issues that get under my skin. And I've been making a lot of work about that for years in a variety of ways and bodies of work. And this particular show is focusing on two bodies of work. And these are the double vessel pieces that I'm zooming in on now. And these works are, they stem from the Skin series, which began in 2001. And in the early works, they were presented a little differently. But anyway, so this comes out of that body of work. And then I am also going to be talking about how I merged the skin work into the tree work and the environmental work. And these pieces are, for example, titled Skin, Tree, and Vessel, and they're numbered. All my works are numbered because I really don't want to get caught up on giving you lots of clues what each one is about specifically, and they're really about a body of work. And I'll also be talking about the Luna window pieces, which you're going to see in a moment. But what a lot of the focus of these works is the surfaces and the almost archaic quality to them, which I'm trying to achieve, especially in these new big paintings. And I'm zooming into some of this so you can get a sense of the stitching, which is embroidery thread, and the surface, which is modeling paste. And I can talk more about that when I show you the individual ones. And now this is the other body of work called Luna Window. And this is work that's specific to the Poverty series, which came out of the first part, which was hung out to dry. And then it was hung out in the projects, and then it became Luna Window. And now this is another one of the double vessel pieces. And you can see that's a 4-foot square one. And you can also see that I use the grid a lot, but I love the use of all these different materials. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that too, how I experiment with so many of the materials. And then those are just the little drawings that are the studies for the work. So now I'm going to start with my screen share on the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to go into the slideshow part and give you some still pictures of the gallery, so you can obviously see it without it flashing by. But I thought that the video was kind of a nice thing because it made you feel like a little bit like you took this little tour. And now I'm going to talk to you specifically about the works. But I'm going to go ahead and start forwarding it on and get past the overall pictures, and then focus on, first of all, the double vessel work, which is also the skin and tree vessel. It's the same type of series, and it's a comment on the delicate balance of nature and biodiversity. And they reference topographical landscapes and the roots of life systems and celestial bodies. And as you can see, these pieces are made in a unique way, a method that I've developed over many, many years. I started staining, it began with staining skin. And then because I was trying to simulate skin for these sculptures that were made out of silk organza, and I accidentally came upon what happened with the rusted steel bars that I was using to hang the silk organza. And when the tea intersected with it, I discovered this method of how I could manipulate tea and rust and encaustic and let me think, fabrics and threads and all kinds of materials. So like people, when they look at these works, don't really have any idea how I create them, because there's this multitude of objects that I lay on the surface. Now there's occasional colored pencil where I come back in an area where I'm not happy with the way something's stained, but the original works didn't have any of this stitching. So this is a newer thing that I started in it started about 2016 or 17. I did a few pieces, and then it got just more and more involved with the embroidery thread and playing with this idea of the layers and how the open vessel was a receptacle for you to put your thoughts or your feelings or whatever. But I wanted this idea of presenting the layers and mixing up what is layered on top of what, and why can you see through this vessel. And it's not a vessel, obviously, that's functional. And you'll see that in my ladders. The ladders are non-functional as well. But these pieces, particularly to me, somehow afterward came out feeling celestial and topographical. And they came out that way from the very beginning. But anyway, this is the newest work that's all in the show. And each one of them, I've used a variety of different stain methods, but it's pretty much all these things go on top of paper in a tray. And then I manipulate the bath that I use. And that one has, by the way, those are all little French knots. So this is the stitching is real. And I like that about it, although I have done fake stitching as well. So I mix it up. And for example, in this one, unless you look close, you don't know that there's a lot of colored pencil marks that are a trompe l'oeil of the staining process, because I want it to feel like it was a stain. And then this is the 4-foot square one that I was focusing on when I zoomed in on the video, and you can see that I use the grid a lot. For me, the square is a formal element, and I want the work to come off as a formal comment, essentially, in a way, a very modern art, abstract dialogue that I'm having with the square. And so my work has done that a lot. A lot of you'll notice all the 2D work, I'm doing in a square. Now, obviously, I'm not doing that for installations or these sculptures, but it's a part of it. And I should also mention that the steel rusted steel frames I have fabricated for me. Specifically, I designed this look, and the last two, for example, they have plexiglass on top that I floated, and I've been playing with this idea back and forth, like whether I want that to be there, I don't want that to be there. I want it to have open access to see it. And the pieces are mounted on modeling paste on panel, and the frames are all part of the piece to me. It's not a frame. I see it as a sculptural object, even though it's a 2D situation. That's my take on it. I don't see it as this flat surface. And I also put the modeling paste back there because I was, again, trying to give this feeling of a fresco wall, or this the idea of an old feeling to it. And the skin and vessels pieces that began about a year ago, two of them started from works that I basically took apart and reconfigured. And I've been using all the same methods. I just completely changed them. And I put in a lot more stitching and caustic. And I'm using the modeling paste as a ground, and I'm sanding it, and then I'm rubbing oil into it, and then I'm sanding it again. And so you can see when I zoom in on the details, I'm doing all these little things that are frankly quite time consuming. Sewing perfect squares onto canvas is not easy, I will say. But I think of these as assemblages. So these pieces really became about this idea of assembling, not only the assemblage as a aesthetic, but as this idea that the multiple layers and the ideas, and you're assembling them all to give a cohesive message. And that's when I started thinking about introducing the tree and these ideas of the environment into this body of work, because I had seen the vessel, or I should say, I'd seen the skin pieces as this idea of trying to think about the body as this decaying material. We're all decaying. We all disappear eventually. And so it's a reference to this biodiversity, but it's also a reference to decadence. It's a reference to the inextricable links of all matter. And so I thought, well, it really is tying into my environmental work at this point. And so that's why I started putting on these small drawings of a tree. And in this particular case, the tree is a tree that was downed in Hurricane Irma in 2017. And I ran around getting pictures of all these different trees. And this tree in these drawings, and further on, I will show you a large drawing of that, was so interesting to me, because what had happened is that the tree had come down, and it was in this park that's not far from the house. And I should say I wanted that tree stump badly, and I couldn't figure out how I was going to get it. This is huge. And what happened is the guys chopped off the top, and then they righted it as if it was this tree that could like suddenly grow, even though it was sitting there after it had been downed by the hurricane. We had a lot of downed trees during that hurricane. So I took a bunch of different views, and I've been using that tree quite a bit now. And like I said, it will appear, oh, I'm going the wrong way. Am I going the wrong way? Yes, I'm going the wrong way. And so here you can see the details, and I have 3 views that I've been working with on that tree. And you can also really see this surface, and the colors in the slides are a little more accurate than they are in that video. It's not that dark, and there is a warmth to the the staining because obviously it's rust and tea. But there's a lot of hand stitching. All those little things are tiny little knots. And I snuck a vessel in there. I always sneak vessels in there. And then the skin in this instance to me was kind of like it was a vessel and it was a skin. And I put this piece in because when I originally started this skin series, I wanted it to be like a drum. And so I have it stretched into the frame. And I wanted it to feel like it was really a skin. And this one was a tough one that is now sitting in a gallery, and I have a few others, but I never got really good pictures of them. I have one other one that I got a good photo of, but it was a time when I just wasn't having the documentation because it's older work. But I did a ton of stainings on this piece. I kept doing it over and over. And this was the first time after I did this piece, I said, my God, it feels like a forest. It feels like you're moving in and you see an opening. But then I decided I wanted to do a different method and not have it strung into the frame. And they're backed by canvas, and so they're not going to fall apart, but they are a little obviously more susceptible to damage. And then this piece was a piece that I reworked and reworked. And again, sometimes that happens with my work. It sits around for years, and then I suddenly realize what I can do with it. And this is, as you can see, this is labeled double vessel number 1. So it's really one of the first ones in the series. And that's all I do. I just number them as I go along. And I thought I'd throw in some of the ones that from 2020. And then I gave you the one you saw from 2002. But then I thought I'd also show you some of the other Luna window pieces and how I work that in to this body of work. It's interesting because there are 2 different bodies of work, but yet they work together because the concepts all seem to overlap to me. But this work is basically, it's about poverty. I mean, that's what the work is about. And in 2005, I had not been making work about poverty. I had not even thought about my personal life with poverty. I just let that go. It was not something I was interested in. And then in 2005, when I watched Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, I was just so shaken by that watching these people that were in poverty, not able to escape, thousands of people died, and it was over 1,000. I shouldn't say thousands. It was something like 1,200 or 1,300 people died, and it was because they couldn't get out. And I thought about that. Suddenly, I just thought, my God, I have to do something about poverty. And so the first pieces really were hung out. Literally, I meant to put a piece in here, and then I got sidetracked and forgot to put it in. But the first piece I did came about a year later, and I had a bunch of those stain paintings and little bodies hanging on clotheslines. And it was called Hung Out to Dry number 1. And then I heard Jared Diamond speak about 6 months later or something on Collapse, on his book Collapse, Why Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. And somehow I suddenly realized, well, was this environmental event that has been caused by human greed, and they're getting worse and worse, and we're seeing more. And this is back, of course, now in 2005, when people were still struggling with dealing with ideas of the environment and still not accepting it. And here we are again, how many years later, doing the same thing. But something about what Jared Diamond was speaking, and then I ended up getting his book. I went to his lecture, and he was talking about, what do you think that people were thinking back in, I have some recording of it, but he was speaking back at this time. He says, what do you think the people were thinking in 2005 or whatever? And why didn't they do anything about it? And the book is all about he talks about these different societies and the main causes of why they collapse. And somehow I thought I have to do something related to the environment. And so the environmental work began. And it started as all this hung out stuff, and then the projects. And I did the conceptual drawings for the environmental work. And a lot of this work takes years. So I'm going to stop talking about that for a second, because I'm going to talk about this show that is the show that I had in Chelsea at the AC Institute in 2013. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work. So for those of you who are not there in Sarasota, you can't tell that these silk organza, tea and rust-stained materials are stuffed with human hair. And I started using the hair really as this, this idea of a representation of humanity. But I had already started using my own hair, and I was working with my own hair, and I had done this other work, but I had been collecting hair from salons since 1998. And I started using it to stuff objects. And the first Luna windows I showed you they all have human hair in them to varying degrees, but these ladders are really jam-packed with it. And at this point, I have many salons that have given me the hair. And I also, I mix medias, I cast, like this piece is cast wax. And it has dry pigment that is poured in parts of the wax, and I rub in pigments to work with it. But these pieces to me really spoke to poverty. And I'm going to tell you quickly why Luna Window is the title. Luna Window is the title because it's about my personal relationship of living in the projects as a young teenager. And the projects in the east side of Cleveland were called Woodhill Homes. Well, these Woodhill Homes were built on what was originally the amusement park in Cleveland, like this grand amusement park, like Coney Island. It was the Coney Island in Cleveland. And I just thought of the irony of this horrible place to be living that was once habited by these people that were having like a wonderful time. It's just weird, like the ghosts, when you think of the ghosts that have traveled in these different places. And I thought, wow, I have to title it Luna, because it's after Luna Park. That was the name of the park. And the windows and also the doors, but the windows were about this idea of escape. And so the broken window seemed like the obvious metaphor for getting out of the projects. And this is just a few details of those pieces. And you can see there's hand stitching, all the roots are attached by hand. And this is now one of the pieces that is in the show down in Sarasota. You probably saw it at the tail end of that video. And then I put in the drawings so that you could see that I do these studies I think I do them for every piece I conceive. I don't remember not doing a drawing. And then I frame the drawings and I sell the drawings. But this idea that, and I also, you're probably seeing, I have this little thing where I date. I'm into numbers and dates and the passage of time. And so I make those little dated things. Now, this is the other piece that's in the show as well.
So can we just stop there for a second? So you have hundreds of these notebooks, is that correct? With full of drawings that you've made over the years?
I do, Mark. And in fact, and it's like I'm going to show you a couple that I just put in, I think one or two that the pieces aren't made. You'll see in the next slide. I have like a stack of these notebooks, and I have all these pieces that I just don't have time to make. And in fact, the other day, occasionally I go back and I look and I go, damn, I forgot I made this drawing. it's so interesting to go back and then also look at that time period and think about what was going on in my life. And the weird thing is that when I decided on this Luna Window title, was at the time of my mother's death. And that's a whole other long story. But then I was like, I was looking at it and said, oh, these are all 2009, where I really got into the first time I was really doing a lot of drawings. I mean, I had been doing, drawings for the sculptures, but this was like, I really got going. Anyway, so this is one of the other pieces that's in the show, and
Can I
you
stop
can
you again?
see,
Can I stop you again?
Yeah.
So Luna window, Luna meaning moon. So you could always see the moon outside the window at night. Is there something metaphorical about the moon for you in the projects?
yeah, well, yes,
Idea
because
of the moon.
it to me, it was like I was peering out this window and I didn't have an escape, but the inside was the only safe place. It's the other thing, where the window represented a barrier and a safety place, but yet you couldn't escape. And I was fortunate compared to most of the projects. I mean, we had Jewish families step in and help us. So, I mean, yes, I was there 2.5 years. And I feel like one of these old people said, I took 3 buses to school and I waited at the corner of one of their, and those are some of the things, the phrases and words I use in the Hung Out in the Projects installation, which Mark saw and in fact wrote an essay for the catalog on that work. And I just remember as a kid, like, you're always scared. And I had even a younger sister and brother who I can't even imagine what their life was like, because at least I was a teenager. I mean, they're 6 years younger than me. So this is why I also like, look at the size of the window. I mean, the ladder, you can't use it. The window, you can't escape through it. And one artist had said to me, the minute I saw this piece, I felt like it took all the oxygen out of the room, like I was suffocating. And I put animals into the work too, because to me, I really identify with animals and their suffering, and I feel like that's also a part of who we are. It's like how we treat animals is a large part, and it says a lot about us. Because if we can care for the lowest species, we'll care for the top of the pole. And it was and now I'm going to get sidetracked, Mark.
So Babs, can you talk about the hair and what made you choose hair and to stuff these vessels and these shapes with hair? What's the significance of hair for you? Just hair in general, but then you mix your own hair with other people's hair. So is that
yes? Well, I don't.
Hair.
My hair is not mixed into this. No.
Okay.
My hair is not in any of these stuffed works.
But your hair, you did use your own hair in earlier works. Is that correct?
Oh, I use my hair. I'm still using my hair. I'm going to show you a couple things at the end where it's my hair, and I'll tell you it's my hair, which is the hair nest pieces. It's a year's worth of hair loss. So wait, so let me go back to telling you why I wanted to use hair, because it's also in the last tree and the pails, and it's a symbol for humanity. It's like all of these diverse beings have their hair cut, and that hair is in there. Now, it doesn't necessarily contain the DNA, but that it feels like that. But how it started was not that. It began because I was trying to make an object that was a distorted body, and I wanted the little hairs to stick out, like they stick out, like we have hairs all over our body, and we don't really think about it, like the hairs on your arm and the hairs on your chest and the whatever, but we have these fine hairs in some instances. And so I thought, well, if I stuff this silk organza, which is a perfect material for this, and it's a perfect material to stain, the little hairs will poke out, so it will feel like skin. And if I put some encaustic on it, it'll really feel like skin. So it was a literal thinking of what skin looks like. And then also possibly the decadence of skin. But then it morphed into all of the metaphors that hair entails. I mean, you could come up with a multitude of it. It's like hair is beautiful on your head. It's disgusting on in your drain or your dinner plate or wherever else you find it. And that was how I began also all of the hair doodle work and the loss of my own hair and equating it with aging and beauty, because that was one of the things I also work on. But I don't know if that answers your question, but how the hair plays into this. But I think it.
I mean, but these pieces that are stuffed with hair, you don't know who the hair belonged
No.
to, but so there are all of these individuals whose DNA are part of these pieces. And while other things decay, we know from the exhumation of mummies that the skin will fall away, but the hair remains because it's pure protein and it doesn't disintegrate as quickly
Yeah.
as in the skin. So your pieces, the hair will survive. It's guaranteed to last way into the future.
Yeah, but the silk organza may not, which
No,
is
I
also
know.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not
I
connected to the human experience of the person that had the hair.
yeah. It's so interesting. I mean, I was fascinated when they find these ancient mummified, and suddenly, or the woolly mammal, when they found the DNA of the woolly mammal because it was frozen. See, hair though will deteriorate. I mean, if you want to really not let it deteriorate, it has to be kept frozen. It has to be kept cold. So eventually, I mean, I don't know how long. I mean, none of us will be alive the time this stuff deteriorates, but sure, it outlasts a lot of things. And that's another fascinating part of it. It's living, but it's dead. It's dead matter. So then how do you define what is dead? So anyway, these are, like I said, like on the left, that's the one you just saw. That's window ladder 16, and that's the study for it. And the one on the right, I have yet to make. But it's one of the ideas I want to get to at some point. Now I put these two together so you can see the concept and then how it ends up. And there, things vary, and but it's pretty close to what I conceive. And then I've thrown in some details so you can sort of see the stuffing. And I use all kinds of methods of stitching to hold the work in. And now this work, I put this in too because it's part of the animal work that's about poverty. And this piece, A Measure Animal with Shroud, is the one that's related to the other animal. And I had started to say that I really remember this incident where the artist Sue Coe, who used to do these drawings of pigs and would sneak into pig factories, and the horrible suffering of these animals. And she was giving a lecture, and this goes so far back, because I was in grad school at SUNY Buffalo, and we're in the lecture hall, I think, of the Albright-Knox, because she was having a show there. And in fact, Michael Oping, I think, introduced her, Mark. We both know Michael Oping. And someone in the audience said, I don't understand, why you're so concerned about animals. What about all these children that are suffering? And then he ends the comment with saying, and besides, I like my pork chops. And her answer, of course, was, if you can care for the lowest form in the world, you'll care for everything above. It's not about narrowing down to, oh, an animal has a lesser value than a human. Again, we do pretty much do that. Here's the one that is on the left, was conceived and was in the Soho show. The one on the right has yet been made. I mean, the drawing's there. I'd like to make it. Here's a couple of drawings. Now I'm going to just move briefly into the hair nest work, because it is also what I'm working on. And I use hair in all of my work in many ways, a variety of ways. And some of the early stain paintings also had hair in it, but I didn't get into that, you know, where the hair is and all that. But these pieces were emerging of my work on beauty and my own beauty and aging. And this is a hair nest. The nest that's up there is made of my hair loss from 2016, and that's why they're labeled 2016. And it's also a comment on the beauty of trees and how I seeing myself and my association with the trees and the idea of caring for the trees. And so I wanted to portray these beautiful trees. So I began this body of work, which has not shown anywhere, although that may be changing soon. And this one, the nest, is from 2015. And I've been collecting my hair for 25 years now, and some of them were the doodle works, and then these others that are the hair nest works. I want to do it over the course of time so I can see the change in my own hair, like what has happened to my hair. And I should go back, by the way, that's cast lead crystal. And I wanted this piece that had this fragility about it. You know, even the silk organza tree limb that I had created in the previous one, it has a fragile quality to them. Not so much when I'm using the actual branch. And I wanted these beautiful objects with it, but I also want these objects of decadence. And this has, for example, a termite riddled stump, and old material and a plywood that the sheets were sitting out so long that they grayed and they separated, and those are cast wax branches that are on the ground. But I'm always assembling these objects that are from the natural world, and then objects that I'm creating, like the drawing. And the drawings are also made on, and I stuck a picture of me in here so you could get a sense of the scale of the pieces. And again, these pieces have yet to show. And then I'm speeding along here now because I'm taking a lot longer, see, Mark, than I thought I would. So this was the before my installation, my solo show now, this was the last solo show, which was ended in December of 2022. And in this work, I wanted to flip the script a little, and as opposed to the more dark ideas about the climate change and the environment, and to focus on the idea of the beauty of a tree. Again, this is what the hair nest works are about too, and the reverence for a tree. I mean, I should also say that those hair nest pieces to me are kind of like shrines. You know, I'm like giving reverence to the tree. And those bricks that are in the spiral, those are all cast shredded paper. I guess you could say upcycled paper. It's all my old files, my tax records, my junk mail. And I have another big stash that I've been collecting again, because I want to expand the spiral. I want to, you know, do a larger installation and do more of these ghost-like tree columns. And the rubbings that are on those patches, those are tree rubbings from actual trees in my neighborhood where I walk around, of these cut limbs. Seeing these cut limbs kind of like a wounded tree. I mean, they prune trees and they do this to it, but it just always feels like they were wounding the tree. So I did a bunch of tree rubbings and appliqued them on, and you can see that here a little bit better. And then the others are dead trees that I wrapped in yarn, because I wanted to do this idea where I wrapped them to try and save them, but obviously I can't save them because they're dead. And then the tree stumps as well that I bring along. And this is a 4-foot square drawing of that same uprooted tree. And then here's the 3 little drawings that were in that show. And this is a drawing that is now going to be in a show at Yale School of Sacred Music called Biophilia in Excelsis, which begins in March, and I think ATOA is doing a talk on them. And then this is prior to the Lost Trees, where I was really looking at the dark side and thinking about Jared Diamond's comment, like, have we reached the tipping point? Is this have we reached the end? Is there no return? What will become of humanity? I mean, the earth will still be here, but will be gone. And these stumps are all made from silk organza and human hair. And in fact, there's human hair in the pail surrounding it, like it's the dirt. And I just put this in a me so you can see the size, and me hand stitching all the roots. There's thousands of roots that went on here, and all the yarns that get stitched on, hand stitched on. And then I close all the little stumps and nubs with this thing that I developed. And that's the end of my slideshow. So I can stop. Should I stop screen sharing? You want to go back
open
to
up to
anything?
some questions or comments at this point, maybe, Babs?
Sure. You want to go ahead and do that? Do you have any questions left for me, Mark, before you open it up?
No, I think we
What's
should
your
open it up to
answer?
the viewers
Okay,
for comments and
Okay.
questions. And then maybe you can.
okay. And I just stopped screen sharing. Are we good? You can, I'm no longer doing it, right? Just
Yes.
Right.
ending.
No, we're just opening it up
slideshow.
to everyone now if they have questions or comments.
Okay. Okay, great. And I did see, somebody did comment in the chat. She said that this is Lothoriel, said that these remind me of death shrouds. Would like to see what would happen if you buried them in soil for various lengths of time. It's interesting because there are a number of artists that I know who do that, where they bury this stuff and then bring it back up. And particularly wrap it a certain way and put, I think one artist, I don't remember her name, but she was doing that for quite a while. So like this, the decomposition, the decomposing of the object is part of the piece. And I don't know when you were referring to the death shrouds, Lothoriel. Was it must have been when you were talking about when I was talking about the lunar window piece.
In the very beginning, when you were speaking about the various processes you engaged with this material, this organza, the personal involvement with each piece of them was fascinating. That's when.
Yeah, they take hours and hours to make, because there's a weird meditative quality to that too, which is interesting. But it's I already have so many, like I said, no one has any idea all of the things I already do to create the object, which is all part of decadence. I mean, I use chain, I use pellets, I use steel. And so those objects are imparting their decadence on a new piece of organza or a new piece of paper. So I'm using an object and decaying it to create a new object. So it's a little bit like that in a way.
Yes. May I say something else just real quickly?
Sure.
I find it essential to know who the artist is as a human being who is since it's directly responsible, I think, for what it is that you do and speak to. And that was given to some degree that it nurtured me in terms of your work when you spoke about your living in this Cleveland tenement and therefore the window and so forth. That was so important to me. You know, in the old days, anthropologists, especially cultural anthropologists, when they wrote a book or they wrote a response to something they were experiencing in some far off place, they would do a preface of who they are so that to the best of their ability, like they might say, I'm a Christian and I was raised in such and such a county of such and such a country, so that we have some idea of who this person is who is making a judgment, in a sense, when they're assessing what it is that they've just witnessed. And so when you spoke about who you are, coming from living in that 2.5 years of the tenement, that was such a profound experience. And that really gives me so much when I'm looking at these Luna windows.
Yeah, well, I do a brief description and mention that, but I was just having this discussion the other day with my sister, and we were discussing about horrific conditions we were living in. And it began prior to that. We were already struggling and ended up having to leave because my father became ill with MS. There were 5 kids, and my mother couldn't hold down a job, and she ends up checking herself into an institution, and it's essentially she kind of goes insane for a while. And I'm the oldest girl, so I'm taking over the family, and you're dealing with these projects, and it was not fun. And it was weird because my sister was now, I mean, all of us are very comfortable. We've made our way through the world. We got out of that, and she's in Cleveland. She went back to Cleveland. They're living in Cleveland now. And she was with another couple, and they ended up driving in the area that we had lived after Jewish Family Service got us into a subsidized home out of the projects. And the people, and it's not a good neighborhood now, even that. And the people went, oh my God, you lived here? And she goes, oh, well, this was the nice place. You know, let's talk about the projects. And so it was just kind of interesting how, when you think about experience, it's impossible to convey your own experience on something to a person who hasn't experienced that. They're not going to get it. At least I don't think they're going to get it. But again, I'll go back to the thing is, we were pretty lucky in that we had obviously the Jewish Family Service that stepped in and helped our family, because otherwise we would have remained in the projects. And we were on food stamps and subsidized, and I got a special transfer to an all Polish Catholic high school where there were only a handful of, I lasted like a month or 2 in an all black high school, and I was scared out of my wits. I mean, this was the 70s, and you're like, it was intense. And, you know, next thing you know, now I get to go hear all the anti-Semites in another school. So you're sort of in disguise, but you're not in disguise. And it's interesting. I never made friends particularly, except I had all the special transfers. All our special transfers hung out together. Anyway, I'm going on too long on this.
But there was some other questions. Somebody asked something about latex, if you had ever tried using latex.
I have experimented not with making the latex rubber, but I have used latex. And I started off because I wanted also like this thin latex, and I was doing these tube-like things with it. And I have a piece that essentially latex rubber frickin' disintegrates. I mean, it's like, you want to talk about a material that doesn't hold up. That doesn't hold up. And I have since repaired a piece a couple of times, and I substituted where I had like a layer of this latex rubber that was stitched together, holding canvas and other silk organza, and it just basically started falling apart. So I came back and backed it with silk organza and stitched that on so that all my layers wouldn't fall apart. So it's interesting. Have you, Lori, worked with latex rubber to create skins? Oh, you need to unmute. You need to unmute.
Yes,
Yeah.
hi. Your work is beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I actually have quite a bit. I've casted with it, and I've also made skins with it in the past. And it's basically that, and then it needs to be preserved with an acrylic over that. But you can get like a very translucent skin-like membrane with it, and it can hold up. So, so I've done that.
It's interesting because I wanted to also stay away from those kind of materials just because I don't know. I mean, even though silk organza too is not, it's not a good material to use if you're totally trying to be environmental, and encaustic isn't either, really, if you're trying to be environmental. So I was kind of, you know, after I had my thing with trying to work with it, and then I said, oh God, I got to preserve it. I got to figure out what to do. And I just said, but it is interesting because I was wondering if that's what was in your work. That's why I'm asking that question, because I know your work. And I said, so that it's interesting.
So I think it used to be, but not currently. So
yeah. And it was one of the reasons I decided to put, for example, the background that's behind me. I have my lost trees behind me. The cast paper is I had done so much reading about how a lot of the recycling doesn't happen, even though we're recycling, we're doing all this stuff, like how the percentage is so small. And I thought, well, you know, I should just go ahead and start really using these materials that I have. I mean, you're just going to shred it and throw it away, tax papers. And I love the concept that my personal things, like my personal hair is in things. Now my personal papers are in things. And if you go along and you're looking at the bricks, you catch every so often, you catch my name. And of course, legally, my name is Barbara. So you'll see Barbara Reingold. You won't see the whole thing, but you'll see little bits. And I kind of love that about it. It's like mail that's addressed to me. It gets shredded up, and the stuff is all there. I just find that fascinating because it's I'm putting in the process of time within the sculpture, within the work itself.
So Barbara, I can't believe I've never asked you this question because I've seen these materials before, but is the silk organza, is it natural silk or do you use synthetic silk? Is it made from silk?
It's natural silk.
So if you think conceptually about the little worms making the silk, it's a lot of organic activity happening before you even start using the material. And then also, I always associate silk organza as a luxury fabric that mostly, in my experience, is worn by, you know, women with some means, and certainly not affordable with someone living, growing up in the projects.
Oh my God, that's such a great observation, because that was a big part of it. When I originally started, I said, I'm going to take this gorgeous, beautiful material and I'm going to stain it. I'm going to sully it. I'm going to make it like a skin that goes through the course of life. And that's exactly what I was doing with the stain paintings. It was like, they were called skin because, like, what happens to you when you go through the course of life? Great observation. Yes. And it was an interesting flip. I mean, it took me how many years? 2022 now. I have this installation that's sitting behind me as my background that I said, I want to go back to the natural beauty, the actual beauty of the silk. And I wanted to create this sacred space that you walk into. That and I had someone that gave, it was such a fascinating thing that she did. Suddenly there was this post during the course of this installation. There was this post on Facebook by a friend who went there, and she'd had this most horrible day, had this experience, and people in a meeting, it all went wrong, and she left, and she was supposed to go to my show, and she said she almost didn't go. And then she went there and she walked in, and it was like, she went, oh my God, I'm in this like calm, ethereal, sacred like space. And she did a video and she's saying this stuff on Facebook, and it was like, it so blew me away. It was like, I'd had such an impact. And in the course of this show, which was at the Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, so many people came up to me and said that they walked in and they just were somehow transformed. Like you felt like you were walking into a sacred space. And that was what I was trying to achieve, this idea that, and the spiral, you know, all the connotations of the spiral. And it was just this idea of the reverence for the tree, and I had pulled it off. And it was all because I switched from this idea of the dark and the decadence, and I wanted to show you the beauty of the material. And it was I mean, on everything else, I've always stained the silk organza, and it almost seems like a crime to do that to it. So it was a fascinating question, Mark. Thank you.
I also wanted to say quickly that I think that your projects with the lost trees is so impactful and so important, particularly for Florida, because I'm sure we all have witnessed this, but in my neighborhood, I chose to live here because of these old trees, some of them 75, 100 years old. A lot of the palm trees are 75 or 80 years old. And the developers come in and they buy these lots and they completely scrape the lot of every single tree on the lot and build these
It
monster
drives
houses.
crazy.
And unfortunately, in Florida, there's not too many places you can go and walk through a forest. And so in neighborhoods, not only do you not see heritage oaks and 75 or 80-year-old trees, but as you would in a forest, see a tree stump or a fallen tree that will remind you of how the trees are alive for so long, often longer, they live longer than we do. And then when they die and stay in the forest, they provide an ecosystem for some other, whether it's insects or creatures. It's the trees recycle themselves into habitats for growth and the future of other living creatures. So to me, that's what I see when I walk into.
Isn't it Mark Dion who did that experiment with the tree fallen in the forest, where he ends up going there and taking it in the Seattle sculpture, Seattle, Washington sculpture grounds, and he developed a greenhouse for it, and he showed how all these things work on it. And I'm in the midst of reading this book that's called The Hidden Life of Trees, and that talks about how all of the trees that are there have an impact on the other trees. So like when you cut down what they think is an ailing tree, they don't understand that the other trees will actually help that tree to heal. And that reminds me of a story of Joseph Beuys and Ronald Feldman. I was in conversation with Ronald Feldman about these hairnest pieces, and he was very interested in them. And we were talking about the trees and how he had this tree that was ailing. He lived up in Chappaqua, and he was worried because he had this tree that was really sick. The tree was dying, and he was thinking he should cut it down. And Joseph Beuys says, no, they talk to each other. The healthy tree will help that tree. And in this book, that's exactly what they talk about, the different types of trees and how they help each other. And I'm talking about the different species, obviously, but it's like we don't understand when we deforest what we're doing to everything else around it, near it. We're not just taking those trees, we're screwing up with all this other stuff that's around it. And this was, I don't know how many years ago when I first started doing the tree drawings in 2018, when I was talking with Ron. And I just thought, well, I had heard of this. And then there's this incredible movie that Netflix has out called Fantastic Fungi, which people should watch because it is fascinating how everything is related to each other in the forest and how the decomposition of one thing is feeding the next thing, and that this whole underground, this mycelium underground, that is literally like these feelers that are talking to each other. So there's this whole language, this underground language that's going on between the trees and things in the environment. So, but mainly the trees are talking to each other, and this whole underground root system does work. And we have no idea about that. I'm seeing if there's any other
Adrian has
thoughts.
some questions.
Yeah,
Who does?
Well,
Okay,
Adrian,
Shelley,
yeah, I do too. I'll wait. I'll wait.
who
Should I-
has a question? I'm
I
sorry.
do have two things. Should I go now? I'll say this now.
Okay.
First of all, I've been taking a walk in the woods recently up here in upstate New York where I am. And I've been photographing the decaying trees, which are absolutely beautiful, the ones that have died, and the patterns and the textures and everything of the fallen trees. It's just beautiful. But that's not what I was really going to say, is that I'm so amazed by your work is fascinating, and I'm amazed by the labor intensity of doing all that you do. I had some idea what that would take. I'm completely amazed by that. I just had to say that.
Well, some of the stuff takes a good year to make. It does take a while to make. There's a couple of comments in the side, but Adrian, you wanted to and thank you, by the way, Shelley.
Babs,
Thank you.
long time, no see. Great.
I know. How are you?
Good, really good, thanks.
Good. Yeah.
So really wonderful work, and I'm so glad that I got a chance to hear your inspiration and the history and how you sort of transitioned and how things relate to each other. So a couple of things occurred to me as I was listening to you. When I was looking at the double vessel series particularly, and looking at examining the staining and the stitching, in many of them I saw faces, partial faces, sometimes just eyes and a nose or eyes and a mouth, a little smirk with one eye. And I saw something similar in some of the tree drawings that you showed toward the end of your talk. And I was wondering whether it's intentional, whether you realize it, is it something only I perceive, or?
I saw it.
Did you? Oh, that's so interesting. No, not intentional.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool then.
That is interesting. It's the cloud theory. It's the other theory.
Right, yeah.
Do I have a minute to show you guys the video of the lost trees? Do you want me to share that? Because I have a minute video of that.
Okay, sure.
Would you like
After
to
I also
see?
have another question that I wanted to ask about something.
Okay. Okay. Should I share screen and then ask your next question? I mean, it's like, I can show you this lost trees so you can get a sense of the space since you're discussing it. It's a little bit easier to see than the still pictures, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But and one of the things I should comment on is that this gallery has incredible light that comes in. And so everybody that walked in, and it was so well lit as well, said they felt like the whole room was glowing. And it was weird because I followed an installation that was all in the dark. So then I come with this show where everything is like light. It's not a very long video, and I can stop it at any time, but it gives you the idea of, I do include the drawings. I include that as part of the installation because I want you to see those. And I'm
I
thinking
see
of
a face in this one.
somebody, yeah, somebody asked, what's my next big project? I'm thinking of expanding. Actually, my friend Caroline asked, look, what's my next big project? And I'm thinking of, I want to expand this. I want to have many, many more columns in the room so that you're walking through this floating ghost-like forest. And now I'll stop sharing. Let me just close it here. And so I think I answered Caroline's, but the idea is also to put together the hair nest work with this lost trees work that I think they should be shown at the same time. So Adrian, what was your other thought there?
Well, not
What are we
to be
doing?
controversial, but I have to ask this. You mentioned in a lot of detail about animals and how we treat them and how much of humanity perceives animal life as an inferior life form. So, are you vegan?
I am not totally vegan, but I am fish and mostly fish at this point. My husband still wants his chicken. And so I do this thing where I buy everything free range. And my feeling is that if the creature had at least a decent life, I spend enormous amounts of money to buy the free range eggs and to buy the free range. The same thing with the organic milk or the whatever product I try to buy so that the animal didn't suffer. That's my worry. It's like, I don't want them to suffer. But even on farms, who knows? But I do my best to do that. But I am mostly, like, I have friends that are vegan. I can't go totally vegan. I tried a couple times. I just can't seem to do it. Anyway, but I haven't eaten beef or pork or any of those things for 35, 40 years now, 35, 40 years. I don't eat that stuff. Yeah. So, was there any other questions? Did I see any hands? Did anyone else have a question? You can just unmute yourself if you like. And I see Barry mentioned, yes, that is a great film. It's a really great film, isn't it? Oh, the tree bathing. I forgot about the tree bathing in Japan. Barry makes a comment about walking in the woods is called tree bathing. Yes, I know about that. Well, because there's this the misting and it helps you health-wise. It's calming and it's also, but biologically, it's you're getting in all of that, what do I want to call it? The air within the forest is why it feels like you're bathing in something glorious.
I think Babs, the concept is we're connected. And so when you walk shoes on or off and you're
Right.
in the woods, you're connecting with nature. Very hard to do in a big city. Besides the trees and the roots, communicating knowledge about animals doing things and other attacks they might do. The mushroom send down mycelium that connect on a much broader level. And
Yes.
there was a performance in that film you mentioned where they showed a tree and the humans were upside down on their head on a handstand. And the point was the brain of the tree is below the earth.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That's a fascinating image, and it made me see trees differently. We see the top as like, it's not, they're
Right.
really sort of upside down in our
Well,
terms.
there's this whole underworld that's going on, and we're
Yes.
finally getting into understanding all the communication in the biodiversity. That's why I like to say that the skin pieces to me are the images to me are cell structure. When I first began the work, it was about thinking about the cells of the body and this whole microbiome and this thing that we're all made of, right? And I was trying to put that down on paper, but yeah, it is fascinating how much we're learning. It's the same thing with the microbiome of the body, which is fascinating too. They're learning how I remember a psychologist telling me that they consider the intestines the second brain. The intestinal tract is literally the microbes are doing all of these things. And it's like the other brain in the body.
It's the first brain. There's a larger neural network in your gut than there is in your brain. And signals are sent to your brain in chemical form for the brain to then decide what for you to eat. You don't eat what you want. You eat what your gut biome tells you. Also, the membrane you mentioned is an important concept. The membrane in the biofrost, the small frost area on land, is critical, just like the membrane of our atmosphere of the planet. So these little fragile elements are very critical for maintaining a homeostasis of the system.
Yeah, that's right. The psychologist told me it was the first brain. That's right. It's the brain of the body, because we think the brain is doing all the work, and it's not. It's interesting. It's fascinating stuff. And that's why when I first started doing my works that were about the outside of the skin, they were also, the bags, by the way, were about the internal parts of the body. They were about the intestinal tract, which I don't tell people that because that would just be lovely. It's like, okay, this works about the intestinal tract, but we have a family history with issues of the intestinal tract and with Crohn's disease and colitis and all this stuff. And so it was for me a personal thing that I was dealing with, and I always love that. I guess I'm going a little off track, but that phrase where you say you feel it in the gut, it's like, where do we get this? Like some people, when they get sick, they immediately get sick in their gut because that's the thing that's keeping us healthy, that intestinal tract. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked here.
But just going back to the trees, I'm sorry.
Go.
Just going back to the trees and how the incredible connection they have, not just to the earth, but also all the energy in the earth, in the universe. Last summer, a slash pine literally exploded. It was about an 80-year-old tree, and it exploded during a lightning storm. So
wow.
the energy that went through the ground and up through the tree, literally, the branches flew 40 and 50 feet away from the original tree. It was extraordinary.
Yeah, I would say, wow.
Well, it just gives you more respect for nature in general and trees. And again, your installations, I think, makes you think and investigate all these issues related to trees.
Yeah, well, Barry was bringing up that movie called that I mentioned, that Fantastic Fungi, because there's this essentially the fungus is really what holds and will probably save the planet, because it in fact it holds more carbon than the trees, which is fascinating too. There's once you start getting into this field of climate change and environmental issues, you start to discover more and more things that are affecting it, not just the deforestation, but see, the deforestation also screws up the whole biodiversity and the fungi as well. So it's, the fungi needs this stuff. And it is interesting how we as human beings, we just step in and always seem to like put ourselves in the way of, the going forward. I mean, we destroy things. That's what the human beings do. They destroy things. Though there are people trying to build things, but that's what we do. We use and we destroy. Anyway.
Babs, can you talk about someone that you've met in the art world or an exhibition you saw that was a defining moment for you and you were thinking about your own work and moving forward?
Yeah, I can remember when, because I have my MFA in painting, and I loved all these great painters, and I loved Lucian Freud, and I was making these big paintings of women bodybuilders at the time. And I hit New York in the like 1990, 91, and I started seeing all these incredible installations, and particularly Peta Coyne. Like, I remember walking into the room of her wax chandelier pieces, and I had already seen the earlier works where she was working with the mud and the sticks, and I'm just such a huge fan of her work. And I remember walking into this and I just went, oh my God, she's affecting the space. And this is what I was talking about. I'm circling back to that idea that somebody said to me, they like came in and I had affected the space, and I wanted to be able to do that. And it took me a while to get to the point, and the first sculptures / sort of installations started to happen. And then I had my first big room installation wasn't until 2003 at the Savannah College of Art and Design. But it was, again, this idea that I wanted you to walk in and have this feeling of being immersed and affecting the space and having this overwhelming effect on you. I mean, people that walked into the last tree, because there's, by the way, I don't even mention there's video in there, and the video is chopping of a lone tree, chopping it down, which I had it was a dead fruit tree in our backyard, and friend came over, he took the film, and I had Jim, my husband, chopping down the tree, and it was like this chop noise. And then I interspersed Jared Diamond talking about the last tree, and what do you think the Eastern Islander was thinking when he chopped down the last tree? And as I mentioned, those things had such a profound effect on my thinking, but it was that idea that I knew I wasn't just going to be a painter, that I knew I was going to be doing these installations. And it happened to me because I was also seeing, I mean, remember, I think Ann Hamilton had the thing, and Nancy Davidson was doing these giant spear-like pieces. And I just think all these interesting women were filling these spaces and doing installations. So that's how I started that journey of going off the painting, although I keep veering back to it, and I use it for everything. I use the methods in one and on the other, and I try to use all my materials in conjunction with each other, that they all affect each other.
That's a perfect note to end on. We're coming at the end of our time, and thank you for a fascinating presentation of your body of work that gives us so much to ponder and think about. And thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you, Mark, for your insights. And thanks to Vanessa and our programming assistant, Susanna, and the board, and the numerous volunteers that makes ATOA happen. Hope to see you.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.